Well, hello everybody.
Hi.
I'm Byron Jajorian. This is Evan Derrick with Ryder Games. And really this is all about Evan. He is the designer of Detective City of Angels. And we're going to start a series where weekly we kind of deep dive into various games that we have. And today he's going to share some strategy tips and a little bit about what went into designing the game. First of all, I guess, describe the game.
Oh, well.
For those who don't know. Everybody should know, but there might be one or two.
Right. So, Detective City of Angels is a game set in 1940s Los Angeles. It's very noir inspired. So you've got gangsters and dames and seedy murders and brothels and Hollywood stars, Breaking Bad. So you're supposed to you play a homicide detective in the LAPD, and you're trying to solve murders in this setting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I love the game. My wife loves the game.
Uh-huh.
But what made you?
I'll
create the game?
I'll slip you a 20 later for saying
that'd
that.
be
Byron.
great. I do. I love it. But what was the inspiration? When did you say, "I've got to do this game"? And
So
what caused it?
I think there were a number of inspirations, but one of the big ones was I played a video game called LA Noir from the guys who make Grand Theft Auto, Rockstar. I think that's really Rockstar. I think it's Rockstar. Yeah. And they made a game called LA Noir, which was set in the 40s and was about solving mysteries and had this great mechanism where you had to interrogate suspects and figure out if they were lying to you or figure out if they were telling you the truth. And I loved it. I loved playing that game, and I wanted a board game that was like that. Also, I love LA Confidential, and which is a fantastic movie, but it's also a book written by James Ellroy. And I love James Ellroy. He writes these more modern, hard-boiled noir fiction set in the 40s in Los Angeles. And those were big inspirations. And I just, oftentimes as a designer, what I'm looking for is I want to recreate experiences I've enjoyed in other mediums, either books or comics or movies, TV, video games especially. And I want a board game version of that. I want a board game that recreates that experience for me. And oftentimes those experiences, this game didn't exist. There wasn't a great noir mystery solving game, and I wanted that, so I made it.
Well, that brings, I think, what you were saying about the interrogating the suspects. I think brings us to the adaptive response cards, which I think is just amazing. Can you describe how that works and how that kind of fulfills that inspiration?
Yeah. Absolutely. A big part of other than the setting, a big part of what sets this game apart is the presence of a player called the Chisel. And the Chisel is actually opposed to the detectives. The detectives are trying to solve the case, but the Chisel is trying to stop them. And the Chisel is more of kind of an abstract concept. They're not like a character or a person in the game. But they are getting to answer for the suspects. So when a detective asks a suspect a question, like asks about a murder weapon or the victim, the Chisel gets to answer for them. Gets to choose whether that suspect is going to tell the truth or whether that suspect is going to lie. And that's what really makes this game unique. And that whole questioning system happens through what we call the Ark System, which is the adaptive response card system. So the Chisel has this book that looks like, I'm going to kind of show you real quickly, and it looks like that for each
spoilers
case.
there.
Yeah, spoilers. Don't freeze the image. Zoom in. But it tells every possible answer that every subject can give for any given question. All the words in red are lies or misdirections, and all the words in black are the truth. And so the Chisel, if you ask, Ramona here about the victim, the chisel would go and see what are all the different responses that I can give, and each of those responses is referenced on one of these response cards. They'll choose which one, and they slide it into this holder, the Ark sleeve, and they pass that to the detective, and the detective can only read the response that the chisel has chosen to give them. The detective has no clue whether this response is the truth or not. So when Ramona is asked about the victim and she says, "I'm sorry, officer, I have no idea who that is," the detective has to then figure out if they're being lied to or not. And the detective can then challenge to force the chisel to reveal whether they told the truth or not.
That's awesome. I mean,
I like it.
That
it's
is
cool.
fantastic. And that is probably one of the main reasons why this game won the Dice Tower Award for the most innovative game of 2019.
It did.
Are there some other little prizes it's won?
Let's see. It won. Man vs. Meeple gave it the Man vs. Meeple seal of approved. I think it's Man vs. Meeple approved. So we got that. The board Game Boy Geek gave it his. When he particularly likes games, he serenades them with the saxophone because he plays the saxophone. So he gave it his sax serenade,
which is kind of appropriate for the
right.
setting.
That's actually very true. And the Brawling Brothers podcast voted it the best production of 2019. So the components, the art, the miniatures, the books, all that kind of stuff. They gave it best production quality of 2019.
Okay. What is your favorite thing to play, the chisel or a detective?
Seeing as I've played this game, gosh, maybe anywhere between 100 and 200 times, and of all of those plays, 3 of them have been as a detective. So I actually really love playing a detective, but I don't really get a chance because I'm also the one who wrote all the cases, and it's impossible to play the game as a detective if you know the mystery.
Well, I played as the detective a number of times before I demoed the game for Van Ryder, and I had to play as a chisel then, and I was not expecting to like it as well. And I actually loved it. I loved playing as the chisel. It's just, to me, it's every bit as engaging as playing as a detective.
I do, of the 197 times I have played as the chisel, I love playing the chisel. I love misleading detectives certain ways. It's a lot of fun. It's very engaging.
Okay, so now I have questions for me, and I
Yes.
hope it'll benefit everybody else. How can you be, as a detective, the most efficient on your turns? Some tips that a player could use to get the most out of each turn.
So how can a detective be the most efficient? So,
for me,
Yes.
I've found many times I'm like, oh, I should have gone there, I should have asked that, or I should
There's
have waited, or...
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. Also, I think we have some questions coming in, so we should probably check what those questions. Do we have questions?
I'm seeing a comment.
Just make sure people aren't asking us questions that we can't answer. All right, so how do you become the most efficient as a detective? So on your turn as a detective, you have 4 actions you can take, which include moving, searching locations or suspects, asking suspects questions, and one of the things you can do is you can go to a mob-controlled joint and get your kickback money. So you can go to bars, CD bars, casinos, other locations controlled by the mob, because in 1940s Los Angeles, while you are interested in solving the crime as a detective, you're also not above padding your pockets with a little scratch, we call it, in the game. So you can go to a mob location and get money, scratch, to use to bribe suspects, intimidate suspects, and do other kinds of things. Money is in scratch It's a very important part of the game. But you can only get your kickback once per turn. So it's really, and because you only have 4 actions, probably one of the most efficient things you can do is to end your turn at a mob location, so you can kick back at the end of your turn, which then allows you to immediately kick back at the beginning of your next turn. That's probably one of the best ways to be efficient. Another really important thing is to note which suspects and which locations have been searched. Oftentimes, the most valuable evidence is found by searching suspects and searching locations. You'll find murder weapons in suspects' pockets. You'll find incriminating photos, in an office location, stuff like that. And if you will note other detectives, where they have searched, who they have searched, you will begin to see, oh, that suspect wasn't searched. I should go search them. Oftentimes, detectives will just not remember that a certain suspect or location hasn't been searched. And they'll run all around the board looking for the murder weapon and not knowing that it's sitting right under their nose all the time, the whole time.
You're talking to me. That's what I do.
Sure, Byron.
I may not know it's true. And what about leverage? I get leverage on 5 different suspects, and then I'm not good at using it at the right moment.
So another mechanic in the game is when a suspect lies to you, when the chisel lies to you, but the suspect lies to you, and you catch them in the lie, you get leverage over that suspect. You can use that leverage on a future turn to ask them a question and force the chisel to tell you the truth. So usually the chisel gets to choose whether the suspect is going to lie to you or tell you the truth. But if you have leverage over that suspect, you can spend it and say, no. You're going to give me the truth, and I'm not going to have to worry about whether I'm being lied to this one time. And so you can, essentially, if you catch a suspect lying a bunch of times, you can build up a whole bunch of leverage on them. So honestly, you want to save your leverage for really important questions, because one of the things it allows you to do is it allows you to block the other detectives from potentially listening in on and receiving the same response. So another mechanism.
That's key to winning.
Yes, absolutely key to winning. So you can ask a bunch of questions, not use your leverage, and then ask about the question that you think is most important, like maybe about the murder weapon, and then use your leverage on that one. But really, you should be using your leverage almost as soon as you get it, I would say. You shouldn't let it build up and stack up and not use it at all.
I'm bad on that one, I'll admit it. Now, as the chisel, what would you say some tips are for being the chisel? Do you play to win? I hear people ask about that. Do you play to win, or do you play just to have a good time? And
one of the challenges in creating a game like this, where a number of the players are trying to solve the mystery, but one player is trying to stop them from solving the mystery. Honestly, the fun of this game is in solving the mystery, in finding out what it is. It's usually not a great session of Detective City of Angels if the detective players never even get close to solving the mystery. That's not a lot of fun for anyone. And so one of the challenges in designing this is that we've created a specific player, the Chisel, whose goal is to prevent the detectives from doing the thing that's most fun. And I fought a long time trying to make it so that the Chisel could play as aggressively and as competitively as possible. And it just didn't work. The Chisel just kept, the more aggressive and competitive the Chisel gets, the less fun the game becomes, because solving the mystery is the fun of the game. So we encourage Chisel players to treat it more like a game master role. You're controlling things behind the scene, and you're kind of guiding the flow of the game, but your goal is to tell a great story and for everyone to have a good time, and not expressly to win. You can win, And I would say oftentimes when I play as a chisel, I try to win by the skin of my teeth. Like, I don't want to blow them out of the water. I want them to get real close, but then not get the right answer. That's usually what I want. I want them to get as close as possible. And so it becomes a game of like how much can I help them and how much information can I give them along the way. But really, that's the most fun of the chisel, is knowing the whole mystery and getting to watch other people as they try to sort out and figure out pieces of it.
Can you sometimes guide one detective one way and another detective another way, where they still might both be able to solve it?
Absolutely. At higher player counts, managing what each detective knows, because no detective will know every piece of information in the case. That is impossible. They are going to get like 30% to 40% of the case. And oftentimes the detectives can have different, like one detective can know 30% of the case and another detective can know a completely different 30% of the case without any overlap. And as the chisel, it's really important to remember that, okay, that player thinks that this is the murderer, but that player thinks that she's the murderer, but then that player maybe thinks that they're the murderer, and then try to feed each of them lies that confirm whatever their biases or suspicions might be.
So that's what you've been doing to me.
Yes. In the cases in the base game, other than some of the cases at the end, they don't get too complex. But in some of the expansions, I've written cases that are incredibly, have a lot of moving parts to them, where the chisel actually needs to take notes on what each detective knows. Otherwise, they won't be able to keep it straight. So it's gotten to the point where then the chisel has to keep track of the information the other knows. So yeah, when I play the chisel, I like to try to feed each detective
what they want to hear. And I'm totally, if they latch onto a lie and just believe something, like they could have the solution if they had challenged smarter, but I just fed them a complete red herring and kept feeding them. That's when I enjoy this. That's when I enjoy the game the most. When you can see them going, I know who did it, and I know that they actually don't, and so I'll just keep lying to them, and they'll be like, yep, I knew it, and they won't even challenge. That's because awesome. It's like in their mind they've already come to the conclusion that suspect X is the bad guy. And I just keep feeding them like, oh yeah, it's suspect X, and they never even think to challenge that because it's just they already figured it out. Put on your poker face.
Yes.
With that, right?
Oh yeah, and also as the chisel, I love doing like hemming and hawing, like I'm like really thinking, like maybe I've already made up my mind, like maybe this question isn't important at all. The answer to this question isn't important at all, but I'll just like sit and go like this and just try to like really pretend that I'm like really considering what response I'm going to give them.
That's great.
And sometimes I'll like put one in and be like, oh no, hold on. And I'll go back and like look and then I'll change it like this, even though I was always going to choose that all along. I'll do that. And sometimes on
That's
really
an advanced strategy chisel tip right there.
Sometimes on really important questions, like if they've asked about the murder weapon and the answer to it is going to open the whole case wide open for them, they will have the answer and I need them to accept the lie. Oftentimes I'll just be like, act like try to make the decision real fast, act super nonchalant about it and just pass it over like I don't even care. So
that's great.
Yeah, I'll do that as the...
Do you have any just overall other tips?
I think a big one, and we encourage this, is that detectives can try to solve the case early. They all have one chance to try to solve the case early, which they can spend before time has run out, the number of days has run out. If all of them, if none of them manage to solve the case successfully early, everybody gets to make one final guess at the very end of the game. And what I would encourage the Chisel players to do is, as they look at those final guesses, not immediately say, oh, Byron got it, or,
Right.
Sean didn't get it, but Byron got it. Instead, look at all the final guesses and then read the epilogue. So there's an epilogue which tells, you read this at the end, whether the case was solved or not. You always read the epilogue so everybody knows like the conclusion to the mystery and the story. And read that. The players will be completely engaged, listening to see if their guess, if they got it right. I think that is the best way to end a session of Detective.
That's awesome. That's awesome too. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the art.
Yes.
So can you tell me about you just making the decision on the artist?
Sure.
And a little bit about that, because that is one of the most. The game is amazing, but when you couple it with the stunning artwork, I think that just takes it over the top.
The artist is Vincent Dutret, who he's French. He's a French artist, and he's very well known in the board game world. He's designed a number of. He did the recent cover for Robinson Crusoe from Portal. Man, he's just done a number of really fantastic. He did Lewis and Clark, but he has this. He does colored pencils. He has this colored pencil style that's just really vibrant and distinct. And I wanted someone who could really bring the world and the historical setting of 1940s Los Angeles to life. And Vincent just, I was already a big fan, but he just absolutely knocked it out of the park. He did a lot of research. He set the tone and the look of a lot of it. I had a completely different cover concept that I wanted, and he pushed it in a different direction. My cover idea was it was like in an alleyway at night. It was dark. There was a body on the ground. It was very dark and dingy. And then Vincent watched LA Confidential. I encouraged him to watch the movie, and he was like, hey, in this movie, it's actually not very dark. It's actually very bright. Los Angeles is very, very bright. It's palm trees, it's beaches, it's sunny skies, and that honestly adds like a level of kind of insidiousness to it. It's not all dark and dingy. It's like, here's awful behavior and murders and affairs and mobsters, but it's all taking place in the bright, gauzy sunlight of Hollywood and Los Angeles. And so his pitch was, it's at dawn and it's behind the Hollywood sign and they found a body, but it was very different. So Vincent absolutely set the tone and look of the game and did so much research on everything. Some of my favorite things are the weapons and the evidence, papers, and different things you find in the game. He did, I would say, hey man, this needs to look like a 1940s phone book. And he would just go off and figure out what that looked like and send me back. And it was just like, my gosh, man, that looks exactly like a phone book from the 40s. So,
well, that's awesome. It comes through all the way.
Yeah.
We do have a question.
Yes.
Without divulging any spoilers, what is your favorite case?
My favorite case.
You might ask that question of me too, but I think you're more definitive.
I think let's see. My favorite case is probably the Black King, which is the final case you get in the base game. I was just really pleased with how the story came out. I was really pleased with some of the puzzles in that case. I had a lot of fun writing it. I don't know if this is I won't say that. But some of the things that happened in that case, I was just real pleased with how it turned out. So I think that's one of my favorites. I also like some of the cases in the newest expansion, which actually isn't out yet, Smoke and Mirrors. I think we've got a box.
Yeah.
Want me to bring that over?
Right there, sure.
there's the expansion. It is, geez, it's getting ready to ship now, or it's on its way. I think it's on the boat. But those are some of the most complicated and involved cases, and there's one or two in there that I was just really happy with how they turned out, about how far we were able to push the system and how much more involved and complex it got. So, but the Black King, to answer your question, is my favorite.
I'm afraid to answer because I might spoil.
Okay.
But I'm going to try to answer without spoiling.
Which
it's almost impossible, but it wouldn't probably be one case. It is the fact that you might see somebody multiple times throughout the cases that I love. I love story.
maybe a recurring villain.
Possibly. No spoilers, but it's amazing. It adds a whole nother depth to the story aspect of it versus them being disjointed cases, which wouldn't be the end of the world, but it just added more than what I was actually expecting when I got it. Let's see, let's see. Most people are just saying how great a designer you are and how happy they are to be here.
Well, this was 100%. I might have had the original idea, but this was 100% a team project. This game would not be what it is without the help of Vincent and AJ and people like Byron and Sean, who constantly developed and tested it. And anyway, yeah, it was a team effort, the Van Ryder project.
All right. Now, this question is kind of off of detective.
Okay.
But I'm excited about this. What are your 5 favorite games that
My
aren't from Van Ryder Games?
My 5 favorite games? Okay, number 1 is Letters from Whitechapel. I absolutely, it's a hidden movement game where, Jack the Ripper is stalking women of the night, prostitutes, they don't call them prostitutes, and killing them, and a bunch of detectives are trying to stop them. It's hidden movement. It's, I think, the purest and best example of a hidden movement game. So, Letters from Whitechapel, number 1. 2 would be a game called Earth Reborn that Z-Man put out about a decade ago. It's this big miniature skirmish game. It's like set in a sci-fi apocalyptic Earth, and it creates these just the best emergent story narratives. So I love that game. I'm gonna cheat a little and say another game I designed is one of, normally I wouldn't do that. So actually, if you were actually to talk about my top 5 favorite games, I probably wouldn't put, I'm very proud of Detective, but it's not because I played it so much, it's not my favorite to play anymore. In part because I always have to be the chisel, and I oftentimes want to be the detective.
And you've worked so hard on it, it's not work. I mean, it's not play.
Exactly.
It's work.
So, but another game I designed called Dark Moon, which is a stripped down dice version inspired by the Final Fantasy Flight's Battlestar Galactica game. But instead of taking 3 hours to play, it plays in about an hour. Man, I love that game. I love playing it. And it's Stronghold publishes it. You can get a copy. But in terms of I love Trader Games, and it's my favorite Trader game. It's the one I made, but I still love playing it. I feel like I can say that because there's lots of games I design, and I'm just like, man, I just don't want to play this anymore. I'm kind of tired of playing my own game, but man, I will play Dark Moon in a heartbeat, even if I've played it hundreds of times. So that's one. I'm sorry, that's kind of cheating.
That's a cheat.
That's totally cheating. Let's see.
So you're at 4 now.
I would say no. I've done 3.
Yeah, so
this is number 4. All right, Kingdom Death Monster is probably one of my favorites. I've never played a game that has given me such a visceral emotional reaction, never, where I was cheering 1 second and then just head in my hands, almost wanting to cry, and just being I'm done with this stupid this damn stupid game. I'm done with it. I don't want to play it anymore. I've never experienced swings like that in a game before. The stories that come out of it, it is not for everyone. It's very hard for me to recommend Kingdom Death to people, in part because of its price point. I think getting into it starts at around $400 or $500.
Yep.
And then there's all the expansions. I mean, people have dropped thousands of dollars on this one game. It is punishingly and wickedly mean sometimes, where you'll have this lovely character you've spent like so many sessions with, and the game will just be like, hey, cancer pigeons show up and peck your person's eyes out and they're dead. Like, it can be that arbitrary, but so I can't really recommend it, but it's one of my favorites. Gosh, now I have to come up with a fifth one?
Uh-huh.
Oh, man. I mean, I could probably pick a lot. I will pick... I'll pick one which is a little different. It's kind of a Euro game. I really like... I'll pick this one. I really like Roads and Boats. Roads and Boats is
That's
Splotter.
new to me.
Oh, it's been around for a long time. It's Splatterspielen.
Uh-huh.
They make these just gigantic, complex Euro games with very so-so graphic design and but they do it's like these boutique games that they just like print like 1,000 of and sell. And I made a custom version of Roads and Boats with all wood pieces and stuff. I loved the game, but thought it was really ugly. So I invested about $200 in a couple of weeks of work and built my own copy. And I really like that game. It's super cool. It's super interesting, but it's basically just logistics. You start out with some donkeys and you try to turn them into trucks, and you're just delivering things to different factories. It sounds really dull, but it's just a fascinating puzzle to solve.
Okay, we got one more question.
Okay.
Can you, this is up to you. Can you show a little bit of the art book?
The art book? Yeah, absolutely.
Edgar asked this question, so.
So this is the art book for Detective. It is 48 pages. Vincent and I wrote it together. It's got all kinds of behind the scenes stuff about how we created things and came up. There's like a whole section about how I wrote the cases, including, if you're so inclined, a bunch of notes as I was designing the cases. Let's see. But then, obviously, the real star of the book is real just big close-ups of Vincent's really incredible art.
Man, that is great.
So, I'm really pleased with how it came out. We put a lot of work into it, way more work than we should have, honestly. But we really wanted it to be nice. And so this is just a really great coffee table or companion piece to go with the game. I think, especially if you're a fan of Vincent's work, you'll really appreciate the details and the insight into his process and how we designed the cover, how we went about the cover. Vincent even goes into the details and talks about, like, here you can see where he's drawn sight lines, like everything is positioned compositionally to really impact the drama of the scene. So hopefully
That's fantastic. I love the treatment on the cover too.
Yeah, it's really neat. So
okay. Well, thank you, Evan.
You're very welcome.
We're going to wrap it up now. Next week we're going to have AJ and Porfirio, and we're going to talk about Hostage Negotiator for some tips and things like that. He doesn't know it yet. He's going to find out in just a few minutes. So be sure, if you're interested in any of these games, either to check at your local retailer or to go to vanrydergames.com. And there's little descriptions about the games, and you can buy them online as well as picking them up at your local retailer. So with that, we'll say Goodbye, and
Thank
thank you
you.
all so much. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone.